Do not threaten what they love, the voice said from inside the crystal. If you do, they will move the stars until your name is only a caution in their children's books. Zenthalara's grand helix glittered under a lilac sky, a city of light wound around a mountain that remembered comets. Delegates drifted into the Millennium Chamber in robes, chitin, and coils of living fiber. They came to congratulate themselves, to quantify stability. 10,000 years of order, 5,000 of compliance, graphs that went up and to the right. None looked twice at the archive monolith in the floor, a veined pillar older than metal, home to voices that had outlived their bodies. High Chair Syraxis struck the air once. Silence rippled outward like a stone through glass. We convened to celebrate predictability, she said, throat frills opening in satisfaction. Threats remain low. The young species are obedient. Tomorrow will be indistinguishable from today. Except when it isn't, murmured a junior envoy, but softly enough to be mistaken for the hum of the climate coils. The pillar brightened. It began with a pulse no louder than a heartbeat. Then a river of light climbed its facets and unfolded a figure in the air, tall, spare, eyes like old bronze. The chamber's acoustics shaped a voice that felt like standing on a beach before a storm. "I am Archon of the First People," the apparition said. "I speak from the edge of our extinction and the beginning of yours." Murmurs sharpened into objections. Syraxis lifted one hand. "What algorithm authorizes this intrusion?" "No algorithm," Archon replied. "Memory. We came to tell you about a world that looks small from far away. Third planet of a yellow star. Oceans for lungs, continents like outstretched hands. Its people call it Earth." A military delegate from the Dominion clicked her mandibles in amusement. "Mammals in a water garden. Cute." Archon tilted his head. "We also thought so. We measured their claws and teeth and found them lacking. We measured the wrong things." Images rolled around the chamber. Snow-bent forests where figures improvised shelter from knives of wind. Deserts whose heat made mirages, where they tapped rivers that ran underground. Storm-shattered coastlines rebuilt with hands blistered and bleeding. Side by side with wilderness came libraries, machines, music, funerals, and the dull miracle of a nurse changing a bandage at 3 a.m. "Strength," the elder said, "is not what resists change but what uses it. They do not adapt only by breeding, they adapt by learning, by binding strangers into us with stories and law. Their worst trait is impatience. Their best trait is also impatience." Supreme Calculator Carix, 3 brains braided by chilled helium, projected a lattice of probabilities. Pre-FTL civilizations are subcritical risks. Convergence models demonstrate 999% containment with minimal force. Your anecdotal dataset is emotionally contaminated. Archon did not blink. We taught them. They improved the lesson. We ruled by certainty. They asked, "What if?" We guarded knowledge like hoarders. They photocopied it at midnight. We built monuments. They built movements. Syraxis smiled the way predators smile when the water hole is theirs. "And yet your species is a rumor and a museum label. If they cannot keep you alive, how can they endanger us?" "They did keep something alive," Archon said, and the light dimmed enough that the chamber's star map took over the ceiling. Lines leapt between points, not trade routes but correspondences, letters, treaties, songs, threads of reciprocated obligations. They discovered the arithmetic of dignity. Each time we struck at their bodies, the idea that bodies matter spread faster. We had cruisers. They had funerals. Ours were heavier, theirs were louder. Laughter scattered like coins. A Krex general patted the plasma pistol on her hip. If they are dangerous, why haven't they arrived? They do not need to arrive, Arkin said. You will, your scouts will find them because you confuse distance with safety. When you do, remember what I said in my first breath. Do not threaten what they love. The projection wavered. Someone cut power to the pillar. Too late, the warning had already propagated, and in the pause before business resumed, many looked down at their wrists as if expecting shackles to appear and were annoyed when they did not. Carrick's rolled up his probabilities like a carpet. Noise, he announced. An antique ghost with a flair for theater. Proceed with the agenda. The agenda resumed. Budget lines were debated. Mining rights were allocated. The chamber's lights dimmed to a polite dusk and then back to noon. The city spun as always. Only two things were new. A sentence no one could forget, and a scout authorization stamped at the edge of the session like a yawn. It sent a flotilla toward a yellow star scribbled on no one's vacation maps. In the monolith, after the last delegate left, a flicker remained like the afterimage of a stare. We tried to warn them better, it seemed to say, but perhaps that was the hum of the climate coils again, or an ancient fault dreaming of pressure. Outside, the lilac sky went amber and then indigo. The future changed color with it. The Dominion's third talon dropped into the edge of a modest system whose star was the cheerful color of tea. 50 ships wore shadows like perfume. Their commander, Kersh, had a resume made of conquered coastlines and broken rebellions. He disliked metaphors, liked punctuality, and loved a good template. He used one now. A universal broadcast in 22 languages. Submit and prosper. Resist and be corrected. It circled Earth in under a minute. Laughter was not on the list of anticipated responses. But laughter came, anchors wiping tears, a mechanic with a welcome to Earth, please take a number sign, an admiral in front of a flag saying, you first. It wasn't bravado without fear. Behind the laughter, the planet flexed like a fist in a pocket. Submarines slipped. Data centers went dark by choice. Trains diverted. Coffee was brewed. Kersh did the sensible, stupid thing. He deleted a mountain. The plasma lance struck a command facility inside a granite heart they called Cheyenne. Rock hissed into vapor. Tunnels became glass. The world winced. Sirens rebuked the sky. There are numbers you do not forget, 3,000 names, 12 minutes from strike to confirmation, 6 hours of phones that no longer rang. An old general appeared on an unjammable secure line. His voice was steady, which is not the same as calm. Commander, he said, you have our attention. You do not have our consent. You have no leverage, Kersh replied. No sensor sees us, no weapon reaches us, no plan survives us. Some plans exist to be survived, the general said. Here's ours. We are going to become very small and very busy. Before the strike, Earth's defense drew circles around bases and fleets. After, your pencil ran out of lead trying to mark everywhere else. Things dispersed. Not retreat, percolation. Companies became squads. Squads became families with encrypted grocery lists. The greatest army on Earth vanished into inventory systems, folklore, and storm drains. Kersh landed scouts to film the inevitable panic. He got something better. Footage of people watching birds go silent over a meadow and saying, "Something's wrong over there." Of volunteer radio operators triangulating a whisper. Of teenagers finding a heat plume in weather data and telling nobody except someone who knew what to do with it. His stealth fields rejected radar and neutrino sniffers. They did not anticipate attention as a sensor. The first human raid on off-world infrastructure did not aim to win a battle. It aimed to write a syllabus. They hit a supply cache stashed on the moon's night side with tools that would have embarrassed a museum. Chemical rockets, suit patches cut from silicone baking sheets, a rocket equation on a lunch napkin. They failed magnificently, except in all the ways that mattered. They dragged back a screaming handful of facts: shield refresh intervals, the prayerful seconds between a lock and fire, the taste of ozone that meant a capacitor was lying. In classrooms with whiteboards that doubled as triage plans, engineers drew block diagrams of alien systems. "We don't need to outgun," a professor wrote. "We need to out-understand." "No time," a captain objected. "That's the point," she said. "We compress time with sharing." So they did. A video of a failed boarding went viral inside the encrypted spine of the Resistance in 20 minutes. It acquired captions in 20 more. A patch that muted a Dominion suit's emergency beacon propagated like gossip. A doctrine emerged no single headquarters would have approved. Teach everyone one thing they can teach someone else by tomorrow. Kersh's after-action reports became palimpsests of the same insult. Unexpected. A refinery sabotaged by a mechanic who guessed a venting protocol from the smell of ozone. A patrol ambushed by people who used deer trails and courier apps. When a 12-person team infiltrated Kersh's flagship, nobody believed it for the first 5 minutes, including the 12. They crawled through a thermal exhaust channel only because their mathematician calculated that even an efficient empire wastes heat. They died where their plan ran out. They smiled with cracked lips into a camera and explained everything they had learned so far, including what they had learned they could not do. Kersh watched the recording twice and then a third time, looking for the part where they begged. It was not there. Instead, there was a captain, Mitchell by the patch, saying, "You think you're fighting our army. You are fighting our homework." After the funerals, public and clandestine, the planet felt different under the fleets. Grief had a direction. Factories sounded wrong in a way only machinists noticed. The note of a line retooled, the base of night shift extended. Trains moved not faster but more meaningfully. Buckets down assembly lines held parts that did not match any catalog yet matched the needs of a device inside someone's head. He requested more vessels and they came, and with them came a question he tried not to think about. What if his empire's strength, centralization, procedure, superiority, was a solvent dissolving every skill but obedience? Glacier 9 was a mining planet with an atmosphere that bit. The first breath outside a shuttle felt like chewing needles. Humans arrived in chains among Karathi mathematicians, glass-boned Zapirian chemists, and a dozen other species whose languages most guards never bothered to learn. Dr. Maya Tran, xenobiologist, daughter of a shipfitter and a school librarian, counted the seconds she could keep her hands bare before frostbite. 90, she said to the woman beside her, Captain Imani Brooks, late of Lagos Search and Rescue. "That's long enough to save someone." "To save how many someones?" Brooks asked. "As many as fit into 90, Maya said and began. Humans pressed close to the long-limbed Karathi, sharing body heat without asking permission. Zapirians taught a humming technique that shared warmth. A Valkyrie elder, fur matted with ice, showed how to breathe shallow and low to scavenge oxygen from thin air. Before the guards finished gloating, 100 people who should have fallen did not. The barracks on Glacier 9 were designed to prevent the formation of we. Species were separated. Work shifts were staggered. Food rations taught a punishing arithmetic of scarcity. Humans ignored the architecture. They traded songs for numbers, for first aid for stories. They made a market of help. Maya's clinic began as a corner cot and a bucket of boiled water. It grew because competence is charismatic. "Show me," a Karathi compositor said, and learned to clean a wound with snow when antiseptic ran out. "Teach me," a Valkyrie runner said, and learned to count pulses, then shipments, then guard rotations. Knowledge moved along the same routes as contraband because knowledge is contraband here. At night they worked the other kind of problem. "If we cannot send messages," Brooks said, "we can become messages." They practiced work songs in 4 languages whose downbeat stood for letters. The chorus said nothing a microphone could convict. The harmony said everything a friend could hear. Maya taught triage using stories from Earth. Earthquakes where neighbors with shovels saved more lives than cranes. Pandemics where the dull heroism of hand-washing outperformed proclamations. "Dignity," she said, "is a multiplier. Treating someone as a person turns one into more than one." The day the supply ship arrived, the guards celebrated the new shipment of prisoners and deuterium drills. Humans celebrated a different shipment: instruments. A Zapirian smelter hid a microscope in a crate of bolts. With it, Meyer and a Karathi named Sarat confirmed what rumor promised. The mine slurry carried trace proteins from a fungus adapted to antifreeze conditions. Nourishment if cultured right, poison if cooked wrong. Civilizations fall when they mistake policy for physics, Sarat said, tapping the Petri dish like a metronome. "Your people don't make that mistake." "Not always," Maya said, "but we apologize with improvements." A guard named Orek, thick shoulders, thin patience, interrupted clinic hour with a speech about quotas. Maya let him finish and then asked whether he wanted to breathe clean air in 10 years. "What?" "You're piping exhaust into the barracks. It saves on vent lines, but it cooks your maintenance crews by 40. That's lost skill. Replace one bend in the trunk with a wider elbow. You'll gain throughput and keep your mechanics alive." Orek glared. He did not report her. The next week the elbow was wider. He told himself it was because efficiency matters. The truth was smaller and more dangerous. He had started to prefer a world where people didn't die stupidly. That preference grows like a crack through stone. 6 months into captivity, a message crossed the snow without wires. "Earth still fights." It arrived in flour on a table, in the pauses of a lullaby, in a pattern of blinking lights. Brooks laughed until the cold stung tears to her cheeks. "Then we're on schedule," she said. "Schedule for what? Not for victory, for contagion." They built the first together line, a shift intentionally mixed across species under the pretense of training. Output rose, injuries fell. Overseers reported success and asked for commendations. Through their new tunnel of time went field manuals disguised as lullabies, schematics as embroidery, maps as games. Through it went a question that had not been legal on Glacier 9. "What do you need?" When the first Karathi died and the Valkyrie stopped the line to carry the body past everyone who had loved him, the guards shouted about productivity. Brooks refused to translate. Maya led a minute of silence that lasted 8 hours. "It's a strike," someone whispered. "No," Maya said. "It's rehearsal." She looked at the clock and did math that felt like prayer. If silence could be synchronized here, it could be synchronized anywhere. If anywhere, then everywhere. Because everywhere is just anywhere multiplied by courage. They went back to work on time. Output peaked the following week. The overseers wrote a memo congratulating themselves on their leadership. Under the lights, the fungus grew in neat circles. Under the discipline, a different circle formed. Humans, Karathi, Zapirians, Valkyrie, and quiet allies in overseer uniforms. They had not yet said the word freedom out loud. They didn't need to. You can hear the word before anyone says it. Supreme Calculator Carix loved curves that behaved. On his wall of light, productivity curves were angels, smooth, obedient, predictable. Then came a kink small, then spreading across dozens of facilities with human populations. Output was up, so were safety metrics. So were questions that had no business on a dashboard. Who decides? Why them? What if not? Audio from Mechanicus Roman 3 sounded like music until you listened for meaning. Translation gave scattered nouns. Brother, tool, tomorrow. Widen the sample and it mapped to a schedule, which gate to ignore, which valve to unstick, which guard to promote so no one died this week. On Glacier 9, Meyer and Brooks met in a tunnel that tasted of iron. We can do 8 hours, Brooks said, pointing to a map she had stitched into a blanket, red threads for danger, blue for allies. 8, Meyer agreed. Long enough to prove we can, short enough to survive. At noon local, a miner set down a drill and did nothing. The nothing spread. A Zapirian held still with the patience of quartz. A Karathi folded 4 delicate hands. A Valkyrie tapped a rhythm that meant hold. Guards shouted. Their voices sounded small in the large room the silence made. Across the arm, other somewheres synchronized their own versions. Verdanche's harvesters paused with blades glinting over grain. Mechanicus Roman 3 produced 1,000 micro-pauses that became macro-stillness. Carix's angels convulsed. Authorization to deploy lethal force. A district commander requested. Carix ran the cost model. Force would reopen lines and also enshrine a grievance whose half-life exceeded any forecast. He denied the request. When the 8 hours ended, work resumed without gloating. Something irreversible entered the air. The knowledge that obedience had been a choice, and choices can be rescinded. The sentence, "We are not alone," traveled on the same routes as lullabies and maintenance manuals. It meant network, and a finish that could be chosen. Politics went outdoors. On Rim Worldler, a governor named Alex Sarr risked an election to prove choice causes chaos. Her constituents chose a coalition whose platform fit on a ration card. No slavery, no secret budgets, no permanent offices. Neighboring systems copied the homework. They called themselves the Free Constellations. The Dominion answered with fleets, and when fleets proved too expensive to be embarrassed, with memos. The memos invoked law. The Free Constellations invoked consent. Law without consent is a threat in formal wear. Carrick sought to arrest Sarr. The optics memo he received made him tired in a way sleep cannot repair. He asked for a meeting instead. "You are breaking the world that feeds you," Carrick said. "No," Sarr replied. "We're refusing to be eaten by it. You'll lose efficiency now. You'll gain neighbors later. You want me to suspend what holds us together. We want you to admit what actually does. Agreements we can revise, leaders we can replace. You like numbers. How many uprisings can you afford in 1 week?" Carrick did the math. The answer was smaller than 0. On Glacier 9, Brooks spread 3 pebbles. "This is where we are. This is what the guards think we can reach. This is where we're going." "What's going?" Meyer asked. "Names," Brooks said. "We'll start using names in official time." It felt trivial. It wasn't. At roll call, a human answered, "Present Maya Tran." A Karathi followed with a name that meant carries maps in the mind. A Zapirian added a tone that translated to cracks gently but never breaks. The guard began to protest and then didn't. Later he told himself it was because arguing over names wastes time. The truth was smaller and more dangerous. He had started to like knowing who lived in his ledger. 3 weeks later, a cluster of worlds declared they would not send quotas, pay tributes, or sit still for inspections. They signed under sentences short enough to say out loud without sounding like they were hiding something. The free constellations asked for talks. The Dominion called them criminals. The Council placed the issue on the agenda, item 14 of 28 between asteroid tolls and holiday protocols. Saraxis opened the emergency session. She did not get to finish. The chamber doors swung wide, and a delegation entered without waiting to be recognized. Humans in civilian clothes, Karathi in formal scarves, Zapirians whose colors read as warm to eyes that could not see heat. Behind them came ordinary Zenthalarans, engineers still in work boots, who had shut down the city's defense grid because they preferred conversation to interdiction. No one fired, not out of virtue, out of calculation that the room was now made of consequences. Meyer and Brooks watched the broadcast from a mess hall that smelled of soup and tin. The audio cut, someone somewhere pulled a plug or a courage, and the picture narrowed to the human in front. "We will be brief," she said. "Your empires are very busy losing the consent of the governed." Brooks laughed softly the way climbers laugh at a false summit. "There's your headline." "And the next?" Meyer asked. "Negotiations," Brooks said, "or panic, either way work." The mess lights flickered. Nobody panicked. They counted beats. If the flicker meant tonight, they would move at dusk. If it meant tomorrow, they would sleep. They were learning language of their own future, and lesson by lesson, it was learning them back. The emergency chamber had been designed by engineers who believed conflict happened in corners, so they built none. The floor was a slow circle. The ceiling was a spiral that reminded you of galaxies and drains. Saraxis stood at one focus, ringed by guards whose hands twitched from training. Opposite her, the delegation of the free constellations waited without uniforms. Humans in civilian jackets, Karathi with their cartographer scarves, Zapirians whose crystal faces held dawn. A woman stepped forward, Lee Reyes, a former public defender from Houston turned envoy by circumstance. She did not bow. "This is not a siege," she said. "It's a hearing. The kind democracies hold in the open, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Carrick's projected probabilities that pebbled the air like rain. "Hearing implies standing to be heard. By what charter?" "Consent," Reyes answered. "Same thing that makes your taxes lawful and not extortion. Same thing that makes our laws binding and not theater. Governments don't own people. People rent governments month to month." Several delegates bristled. Saraxis smoothed the air with a gesture. "Your phrases are tidy. The universe is not. We maintain order." Reyes looked almost kind. "Order is what a classroom has when the teacher earns it. Control is a locked door. The difference is legitimacy." She set a palm-sized projector on the dais. Images unfolded. Strike votes on Verdantia translated into gestures so non-literate workers could participate. A town hall under a tarp while rain banged like drums. A Karathi referendum where ballots were threads tied to poles. Blue for yes, green for no, counted by children who were trusted because everyone watched them grow up. You think we're contagious, Reyes said. We are. Not because we're human, because dignity scales. One person treated as a person makes two, two make four. A Dominion admiral scoffed. Cute civics lesson, ships talk louder. Ships talk fast, Reyes said. Civics talks long, that's the point. The chamber screens filled with a map of the arm. A-tower silence pulsed at 100 nodes, then 200, then more. Not a battle, a pause. Kerix's models hiccuped, restarted, hiccuped again. Kersh, watching from orbit, felt for the first time that he was not at war with Earth so much as with the cost of ignoring it. State your demands, Saraxis said. 3, Reyes said, and held up fingers like she was teaching a class of 11-year-olds. First, end enslavement in law and in practice. Second, immediate amnesty for non-violent resistance. Third, local self-governance with right of exit from any compact, including ours. No empire by another name. You ask us to leap from a cliff, Saraxis said softly. What if there is no ground under the fog? Reyes smiled the way hikers smile when the fog thins and the bridge appears. Build it as you cross. Planks, term limits, transparent budgets, civilian control of the military, independent courts that can tell us no. We brought drafts, models from places that tried and learned. None are perfect, that's the lesson. She glanced at the feed from Glacier 9. Faces around a soup pot, steam making halos. Systems must be corrigible by the people inside them. Kerix, who respected clean arguments even when they damaged his gradients, asked the question mathematicians ask when the chalkboard gets too elegant. What about bad actors? Sunlight and small levers, Reyes said. Open records, independent press. And a rule we stole from our worst mistakes. Never build a tool you wouldn't hand to your enemy. If a governor can disappear a person, you've already admitted you prefer fear to consent. The chamber breathed. Old habits scratched the door. Saraxis looked at her guards and made a decision that would be history in 12 languages and a proverb in 15. She gestured them to stand down. I will not sign away the galaxy in a day, she said, but I will sign a day that changes the galaxy. A ceasefire, a congress, a vote. Reyes nodded. We can live with try so long as it is real. Real is measured, Kerix said almost to himself. Good, Reyes replied. Then you'll like our homework. The feed cut. 1,000 watch parties in secret rooms and noisy kitchens exhaled. On Glacier 9, Brooks thumped her knuckles once on the mess table. We bought a clock, she said. Let's use every minute. Maya checked her list. Food cultures taking, ventilation elbows widened, first aid posts staffed, lessons written in lullabies. In the roar of history, the quiet work remained the hinge. It began with a lamp, not the overhead floodlights the guards controlled, but a miner's hand lamp, held high by a Valkyrie named Tovin, so the Karathi beside him could tighten a coupler without losing fingers to the dark. You have your own shift. A guard snapped. We have our own, Tovin said, but not only our own. Small insubordinations teach big grammars. By noon, the together line folded itself deliberately, human, Karathi, Zapirian, human again. When the conveyor jammed, Orek, the guard who had widened the elbow, hit stop without waiting for approval. Safety, he barked, trying to sound like he didn't care about anything but throughput. The truth warmed him like contraband tea. At roll call, Brooke stepped forward with a bandage on her shoulder and a grin like a dare. Imani Brooks, present. She said the last word as if it meant accountable, not captured. One by one, names crossed a threshold from rumor to record. Sarat, whose name meant maps in the mind. Crystal Song, whose harmonics carried comfort, Tovin, who held lamps, Maya, who counted 90 seconds with her hands. The overseer tried to interrupt. Orek lifted a palm, not to threaten, to ask for time. They go faster when they know each other, he lied, discovering that in the mine of moral change, white lies sometimes fairy ore. After shift, an alarm wailed, collapse in shaft E. Rock eats indiscriminately, justice must not. Humans ran. Karathi followed, calculating stress angles aloud. Zapirians listened to the stone and found hollows that sounded like sanctuary. A dozen species made a line of ropes and hands. They pulled 6 alive and 2 dead. Brooks marked the names in grease pencil on the mess wall. The guards stared at the wall as if it had committed a crime. It refused to let the dead be statistics. Maya gave Orek the clipboard. "You know these tunnels," she said. "Tell me what we missed." No one had asked him to in a year. He pointed at a seam, at an angle, at a rule of thumb old miners pass without writing. The next day, a Karathi trainee repeated Orek's rule back to him in careful Zenth. Something like pride made his chest feel too small for his breath. That night, the work song changed time signature. Downbeats became dispatches. Hold at gate 2, vent at 3, child with fever, send Maya. Guards patrolled past a lullaby and heard only a lullaby. The network heard a map. The A-tower silence came again, but this time it carried a rider. Workers stopped and kept the mine safe while they did. Shields checked. Gas bled. Roving repair crews fixed a bearing they had no obligation to fix. "We refuse to be accused of sabotage," Brooks said. "We will not be tools. We will show we are artisans." Brooks met Orek in the elbowed corridor. "You could report me," she said. "You could also not." "I could also die of paperwork," Orek muttered, then surprised himself. "If the roof stays up because you stop, that is efficient," he finished lamely. "Say right," Brooks said gently. "Efficient," he insisted, but he did not correct the board when someone wrote right beside safe on the checklist. The supply ship came late and left early. Before it did, Orek swapped out 3 crates after memorizing a route that had once been just a patrol. The crates contained legal things that would become subversive in the right light. More lamps, gloves, valves that sealed properly. He told himself he was preventing accidents. He was. He was also committing to a world where preventing accidents mattered. When a Dominion tribunal demanded example punishments, 2 workers from each species, public, televised, Orek heard his name in his supervisor's throat and made a different noise first. "Glacier 9 exceeded quota since the integration initiative," he said, seizing a memo line everyone had used as cover. "Any decimation harms output and contradicts Directive 7. He expected pushback. He got it, muted, bureaucratic, tired. The tribunal delayed. On bureaucratic time, delay is treason's cousin. Meyer and Serrat finished a draft no one had asked them to write. The charter of the mine, 7 sentences long, painted on scrap plasteel in 4 alphabets. 1. Names, not numbers. 2. Safety before speed. 3. No species works alone in danger. 4. Knowledge is shared, not hoarded. 5. Rest is part of work, we measure both. 6. Grievances have a path upward that is not a weapon downward. 7. Any rule may be questioned if you can show a better one. Utopian, a Karathi elder warned. Provisional, Maya said. Everything stays if it works. Everything changes if it doesn't. That's not utopia, that's maintenance. Orek read it twice, brow furrowed, then tapped Rule 6. This one, it keeps us from using each other like tools. Tools are good, Brooks said. People use tools. Bad is when tools use people. He snorted, but he kept a copy. Later, when a pipe screamed and a schedule wanted to throw bodies at it, he used the charter to justify the fix his heart had already chosen. Paper can be armor if you make it so. The first Congress met on a ship whose cafeteria still smelled like soup. Not a capital, an itinerary. Delegates came aboard with carry-ons, a Karathi ledger that counted consent, a Zapirian casket holding seeds for trade, a human duffel of drafts with coffee stains. They sat at a table too small for ceremony and exactly right for work. Reyes called the meeting to order by refusing to bang anything. Noise isn't legitimacy, she said. Votes are. They started with the smallest defensible unit, a township that could hold a conversation. Stacked above it, districts, systems, and a Congress that could be fired by the levels below. Term limits short enough to make ambition neighborly. Budgets you could audit with a pencil. Courts independent enough to tell heroes to sit down. A right of exit carved in the first article like a door kept unbarred on purpose. Carrick's arrived with models that said everything would slow down. Democracy introduces latency, he observed. Latency taxes survival. Dictatorship introduces error, Reyes replied. Error taxes survival more. People do their best work when they own it. You can't coerce excellence. You can coerce compliance, and compliance is boring. We have avoided coups because we avoided elections, Siraxis said, honest and tired. We also avoided consent. A Karathi delegate traced circles on the table in chalk. We are cartographers, she said. Borders are arguments you can see. The healthiest maps change. The most dangerous are the ones that pretend they don't until they do in blood. They wrote a Bill of Rights in sentences short enough for a child to memorize and a judge to enforce. Speech that criticizes power. Press that verifies. Assembly that blocks roads some days and cleans them the next. The right to refuse a war whose reasons you cannot see. The duty to show your math when you say no. Kersh, summoned to testify, expected humiliation and got something worse for his pride, a syllabus. A colonel asked him about logistics. A Valkyrie elder asked about funerals. A human mechanic wanted to know whether Dominion maintenance crews had the authority to down a ship without fear. Sometimes, Kersh admitted. Not often enough. Fix that, Reyes said. Even if we never share a flag, share safety. Out of the chamber and onto the nets went lessons with receipts. How to de-escalate a protest. How to schedule officers so nobody becomes the state by accident at 3 a.m. Why you publish a budget in calendars and not just in columns. Civics teachers on Kansas plains and Karathi dunes built joint syllabi. Children debated quorum rules over lunch. A newsfeed interviewed Meyer about Rule 2 of the Mine Charter. Safety before speed, she said. It's not just hard hats, it's policy. It's why we cap terms and publish drafts. It's why we can fire anyone, including me. You sound American, the interviewer teased. I sound human, Maya said, and Brooks, off camera, snorted, same difference on our best days. Carrick's returned with revised models. They still had latency. They also had resilience curves he found indecently attractive. Distributed decision-making increases error detection, he admitted, and buffers shocks. Welcome to the party, Reyes said. There's pie on deck 3. The Congress voted to dissolve the old council and recognize any world that could pass a basic audit of consent. Siraxis, who had spent a lifetime armoring order with ceremony, removed her insignia and placed it on the table like a tool no longer meant for the current job. "I have been wrong in public," she said, voice steady. "Please record that. It will help the next person be right in time." They applauded, not because spectacle makes laws, but because gratitude oils gears. In the back of the room, Orek stood very straight in the borrowed coat of a safety inspector and listened to a Karathi child explain how to count ballots with beans. He looked down at his hands and realized they were empty of weapons and full of things to carry. 3 years is not long in astronomy. It is long enough for habits to change. Patrol routes became rescue corridors. Fortresses grew labs and daycare. The ship that had hosted the first Congress kept orbiting, a cafeteria that refused to become a throne room. On Glacier 9, the mine kept its charter. The wall of names kept growing, not only for the dead, but for the newborn. Brooks officiated weddings with the same voice she used to call drills. Orek failed to be demoted and kept being promoted into jobs where his authority was the art of preventing harm before it could pose as necessity. Saret drew a map of the tunnels that folded into a map of the new law. Paths, intersections, exits. Maya left for the Explorer Corps, and the send-off looked like a Houston backyard. Mismatched chairs, a grill someone swore could not work in low oxygen and did, kids underfoot, a Zapirian quartet playing something between blues and Crystal Rain. "Bring back stories," Brooks said, hugging hard. "Bring back people." Earth spun below a ship named Harmony when the signal came in from the rim. 17 new species, clustered in star nurseries and stubborn deserts, all on the lip of radio. The team argued the way good teams do over words. Protect was too paternal. Guide was a trap. They chose visit and invite. Maya stood at the viewport with Rays, who had traded Envoy's urgency for teachers' patience. "We learned the hard way," Rays said. "Maybe we can teach the easy way." "Careful," Maya said. "Easy becomes lazy fast." "Then we build the thing that prevents that," Rays replied. "A loop, review, recall, right of exit. We don't deserve trust unless we're built to lose it safely." They dropped into a sky the green of old bottles over a world that smelled like rain on stone. Villages came out to meet them the way children meet a parade. The first contact team consisted of a doctor, a mechanic, a translator, and an auditor with a backpack full of blank forms. The mechanic fixed a pump. The doctor taught hand-washing with a song children loved instantly. The translator learned 3 words nobody had thought to list: welcome, no later. The auditor sat on a stoop and explained rights, what they meant, how to use them against the Alliance if necessary. "Why tell them how to say no to us?" a junior officer asked. "Because power that can be refused is not a secret empire," Rays said. "It is a contract renewed out loud." She looked up at a sky with no corners and thought of rooms with spirals, minds with rules, tables with too little space and just enough courage. Somewhere far behind them, Syraxis was teaching statecraft to students who had never bowed to anyone. Carix was arguing with a 10-year-old about how many beans counted as a majority. Kersh was supervising an exercise called Stand Down, and discovering it felt more like mastery than any conquest had. That night, under a new constellation, Maya read a page of the Mind Charter to a village that asked for stories, not speeches. "Rule 7, she finished. "Any rule can be questioned if you can show a better one." A hand went up. The child who owned it asked, "Even the rule about questioning?" "Especially that one," Maya said, and laughter moved through the square like a warm front. When they lifted, the village signal light blinked a pattern the team had not taught them. Brooks would have recognized it as a work song. Reyes recognized it as consent written in rhythm. Maya recognized it as the sound of dignity doing math. Back in the archive on Zenthalara, the pillar flickered. Arkin's face surfaced like a memory you finally understand. No words, he didn't need them. The city around the pillar was different now, corners a little rounder, guards a little bored because boredom is the dream of peace, a public library where the agenda used to be. Earth spun with its ordinary miracles, barbecues, late-night nurses, shopkeepers who know your name, a launching pad that smelled faintly of oranges. The Alliance spun with it, not as a chain, but as a braid. Do not threaten what they love, the first warning had said. In the end, the galaxy had learned a better sentence to carry forward. Love what they threaten to become. Because the stars you can move without war are the ones you move by invitation, inch by inch, charter by charter, name by name, together or not at all.